in the sunshine. As I say, the winds for most are quite a bit lighter than yesterday. Now, as the winds ease off this evening and overnight, the frost will take hold rapidly. It's going to be a really cold night tonight, and later in the night across the south, we could also see some dense freezing fog patches. Temperatures, even in towns and cities, below freezing. Rural areas well below, minus double digits, where there's snow lying on the ground, possibly over northern England and Scotland. Turns slowly milder tomorrow morning as wet weather comes into Northern Ireland. That will bring some snow for a time over the hills, and then as the wet weather hits the colder air across Wales, again some snow for Snowdonia, and then northern England, parts of Scotland. Some of the higher routes here for a time tomorrow, not very pleasant, with snow falling and the winds picking up as well. A cold air across the east, turning milder in the southwest, but the colder air pushes back in as the wet weather sweeps away, and that allows the showers later tomorrow to turn back to snow across Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and then through Thursday night across northwest England and North Wales too. And again, things likely to turn icy. So we do have warnings in place, yellow warnings from the Met Office. Next couple of days for snow and ice. See the Met Office website for details of those weather warnings.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. MPs are back in Parliament today for the first time since the Christmas recess. I have a fantastic political panel looking ahead to Prime Minister's questions and the year to come. And I have an incredible interview with Labour MP Stephen Timms, who says he'd like to meet the woman who stabbed him 11 years ago at his constituency surgery. First, it's the news with Rosie Wright. Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date at 12 o'clock. Coronavirus testing rules are set to be relaxed in England in an effort to try to reduce workplace shortages because of people isolating. Asymptomatic people who test positive for coronavirus on a lateral flow test will no longer have to wait for a confirmation on a PCR before they begin their official self-isolation. The self-isolation time is 10 days, with people able to exit after a week if they test negative 24 hours apart on 2 separate days on tests taken on day 6 and 7. Well, meanwhile, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, will miss today's Prime Minister's questions after himself testing positive for coronavirus. The Deputy Leader instead, Angela Rayner, will stand opposite the Prime Minister at 3 p.m. today. Sir Keir previously had to self-isolate after testing positive on the day of the budget in October. Hospitals in Greater Manchester have postponed some non-urgent surgeries amid staff shortages because of COVID. At least 6 hospital trusts have declared critical incidents, meaning priority services may be under threat. The Prime Minister acknowledged parts of the NHS may feel overwhelmed in the coming days. Yesterday, over 218,000 cases of coronavirus were confirmed in England and Scotland. That's the highest number since the start of the pandemic.
We've been looking at the contingency plans and building up the contingency plans all over the Christmas with our colleagues in the NHS and the people working in the NHS trusts. So the critical state that some of the trusts have declared, that is the first stage actually in our contingency planning.
An ambulance service says it's still asking suspected stroke and heart attack patients to try to get lifts into hospital. The North East Ambulance Service brought in the measure as wait times, which are usually around 18 minutes, went up to an average of an hour. It's due to increased demand in the new year, combined with COVID-related staff shortages. Its medical director says it's still taking too long to get patients to hospital via ambulance, and where safe and possible, it's best for them to try and use other means. Nicola Sturgeon is going to address the Scottish Parliament later today on any possible changes to restrictions. The First Minister will speak at 2 o'clock. We'll bring you that statement here. Opposition parties have called for the 10-day isolation period to be cut to 7 days if someone tests negative twice. In other news now, we'll hear more on this shortly. The MP, Stephen Timms, says he would welcome the chance to meet the woman who stabbed him. The Labour MP for East Ham was attacked in 2010, his attacker serving a life sentence for attempted murder. Well, she's written to him to apologise. Stephen Timms told GB News a face-to-face meet-up before she's released from jail would help with the restorative justice process.
She'd grown up in my constituency and spent her life there. And I would have liked to have met her then. The police at the time said they didn't think that was a good idea, so I didn't pursue it. But now that the opportunity perhaps has arisen again, I'd welcome that.
We'll hear the full interview shortly. The US judge now in the sexual abuse case against Prince Andrew says he'll have a decision very soon on whether or not he'll dismiss the case. The Duke of York's lawyers argue he's covered by a 2009 deal struck between his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. She claims the prince sexually assaulted her when she was 17. Prince Andrew denies all the allegations. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, has said he wants to get on the nerves of unvaccinated people by restricting their freedoms. The comments have sparked a furious backlash from his opponents who say the words aren't presidential. France has one of the highest vaccination rates in Europe at more than 90%. Yesterday, though, they reported more than 270 coronavirus cases. There's been political outrage over the decision to grant tennis champion Novak Djokovic a medical exemption from vaccine rules for the Australian Open. Having a COVID jab is a requirement to play in the tournament in Melbourne this month, unless there is a genuine reason for an exemption. The world number one has refused to reveal his vaccination status, but organisers deny he's been given special treatment. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison said Djokovic should be treated no different to anyone else.
He's not vaccinated. He must provide acceptable proof that he cannot be vaccinated for medical reasons and to be able to access the same travel arrangements as fully vaccinated travellers. So we await his presentation and what evidence he provides to support that. If that evidence is insufficient, then he won't be treated any different to anyone else and he'll be on the next plane home.
The mother of one of the Manchester Arena bombing victims says her son would love a new memorial opened in their memory. Martin Hett was one of the 22 people killed at an Ariana Grande concert in May of 2017. Well, the memorial, it's called the Glade of Light. It's a white marble halo with the names of each of the victims. It opens today. Families like Martin's who lost loved ones have been able to put memory capsules inside the halo. It's now 6 minutes past 12. You're up to date. I'll have more for you in half an hour. Right now, back to the briefing with Gloria.
Hello and welcome. If you were expecting Prime Minister's Question Time, it's now at the new time of 3 p.m. for this week only. We'll bring you that live later today. But for now, we've got a packed show for you anyway. I'll be joined by MPs from across the political spectrum to discuss Boris Johnson's decision to ride the COVID wave rather than impose further restrictions. With hospitals coming under severe pressure, is it too risky or simply the sensible way forward as we learn to live alongside the virus? We'll be looking forward to PMQs this afternoon and to the year ahead. What will be the flashpoints and challenges? It's over 10 years since Labour MP Stephen Timms was stabbed at a constituency surgery. Thankfully, he survived. And in today's Real Me interview, he says he'd like to meet the woman who tried to kill him. And give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. So it's the first day of term in Westminster this year. It was a turbulent end to 2021. Will 2022 be easier? The Commons sits from 2:30 today, so Prime Minister's Question Time today will be at 3. I'm delighted to have MPs with me in the studio. I'm joined by Peter Bone, Conservative MP for Wellingborough, Neil Coyle, Labour MP for Bermondsey and Old Southwark. And joining us from Westminster, it's Vera Hobhouse, Liberal Democrat MP for Bath. Welcome to you all and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Neil, you start the year well because you do have a Prime Minister's Question today.
I'm up at 3 o'clock, yeah.
You're up at 3 o'clock. So are you going to tell us what you're going to ask?
There's so much I'm tempted to go on. And one of them is the stats that came out yesterday around the German test and trace system, which was effective, actually worked, covering a bigger population, cost £800 million, just over £800 million. Our test and trace system cost £37 billion and didn't work. So I'm very tempted to ask for an explanation from the Prime Minister as what he think went wrong.
Good question. For the Prime Minister, Peter Bone?
I think the biggest thing I'm seeing at the moment is the increase in energy prices and the cost of living. People in my constituents want to know why the VAT hasn't been removed from those costs, because we now have the freedom to do it since we came out of the European Union. And I think the Prime Minister a few years ago said that's what we would be doing.
He did indeed. He wrote, an article in The Sun, indeed.
Solid Labour policy.
We are going to
I know you like putting taxes up.
No, we've been calling for the VAT exemption for 6 months and it's a costed plan from the Labour Party.
It's going to be a fun one, I can see. Vera, if you had a Prime Minister's question today, what would you be asking the Prime Minister?
We are in a climate emergency. We know that the fossil fuel industry at some point needs to be phased out, the sooner the better. And I would ask the Prime Minister, when is the end date for subsidising the fossil fuel industry? Currently, there is no level playing field between energy providers from renewables and energy providers from the fossil fuel industry. And if we are serious about the climate emergency, we need to make sure that we are getting to the point where all our energy is being provided through renewables, and these industries need to not be disadvantaged against the fossil fuel industries.
Thanks, Vera. I am certain that Peter Bone would love to respond to you on that, and we are going to be discussing energy a bit later. Peter, let's start with coronavirus. Chris Whitty said last night the NHS faces very substantial pressure over the next couple of weeks. The Prime Minister said previously he would bring in further restrictions if there was a risk of the NHS being overwhelmed. He's too scared of you, isn't he?
I've never. Gosh, you've taken my breath away. No. I mean, he's got it right to. It's been proved he was right over Christmas. You know, Scotland, Wales had added restrictions, whereas we didn't, and we seem to have done very well. We kept industry going, we kept people's spirits up. There seems to be this new variant of coronavirus is easily transmissible, but it seems to be much milder, and therefore I think they're doing it the right way. But absolutely, I'm sure if there was some real reason to do it, the Prime Minister wouldn't hesitate to bring in measures, and I'd support that if it was necessary. But it isn't necessary, and the Prime Minister's made the right call.
Vera, back to you. Do you agree with Peter? The Prime Minister's made the right call on this. We've got to ride the wave.
All through the pandemic, the government has been behind the curve and introduced restrictions too late. That has made life very, very difficult for the population at large, but also the economy. We, as Liberal Democrats, have always been calling for restrictions or measures to restrict the spread of the virus to come in much earlier. And therefore, we still are a country with the highest COVID infections, with the highest numbers of people in hospital, and indeed the highest death rates for comparable countries across Europe. So I believe that the Prime Minister has got it wrong for most of the pandemic. We should be much more cautious. We should have done a lot more around social distancing, mask wearing. We know that in schools it becomes a problem. The pressure on teachers and teaching continues to be a massive problem. And the Prime Minister and the government leaves it to the front line to sort out the problems that they themselves don't actually want to tackle.
Thank you. So Neil, Liberal Democrat, very wants more restrictions. Does Labour?
Well, look, let me just disagree slightly with Peter first, because I think to describe the Prime Minister having done very well, I would dispute that simply because we can't have hospitals declaring critical incidents. We can't have ambulance services without the staff to pick people up having strokes and heart attacks. I think we need to be a bit more sensitive with language around how the country is seeing the impact of Omicron in particular, including on things like the police service. Without sufficient police out there doing their job, we're less safe. So the idea that things are going very well, I think, is easily disputed. And I fear that this riding the wave is just the latest herd immunity, let the bodies pile high in 1,000 strategy of doing nothing. It's the Prime Minister who seems unable to take decisions, in part because of people like Peter on his backbenches, but actually because he lacks fundamental leadership abilities. Whenever key decisions and difficult decisions are needed, he disappears. He disappears for 10 days in the run-up over Christmas. It's absolutely extraordinary to have a leader absent over such significant periods.
So, Peter, Neil's suggestion is that the Prime Minister isn't facing up to the crisis. We may not have more formal restrictions, but so many people are isolating in our police service, bin service, health service.
Well, the question is about whether the isolation period needs to be as long as it is, and whether the lateral flow tests are accurate enough to say, well, if you're clear on the lateral flow test, you can go in. I think the isolation period does not need looking into. The Americans have gone down to 5 days, so I think that's a point that could be looked at. But I have to say, every time this year, it's crisis in the health service.
Only under Conservative governments. Well, there weren't winter crises.
No, when Labour was in power,
I know there's an idea, there's an attempt by them to make out this happens every year.
No, but
it's just not true.
Well, the fact is the Conservative government's put a record amount into the NHS, which we won't see the benefit of until the future, of course, partly because we've come out of the EU and we're using that money to put it into the NHS rather than into the pockets of the European Union. But we will see. But I don't think that if COVID wasn't here, we'd still have the same headlines that this is a crisis moment in the NHS because of the winter. Because
we would whilst the Conservative in government, because this is a routine thing. We entered.
You may well be right, but let's see if the investment we put in there will work.
We entered the pandemic with 100,000 vacancies in the NHS workforce. That meant the NHS was impaired in its ability to do its job. We didn't have sufficient PPE, and it's all very well saying now, just changing the isolation dates would answer things. People can't get the tests, and we've had a government. We've got kids going back to school. My daughter's going back to school today. We've got kids going back to school, and less than half have been vaccinated under the government's programme, and less than a quarter of the schools the government said they would provide ventilation for have been ventilated. So this is a government that is failing our country.
Peter, there will be a statement later from the Prime Minister. I wonder if he'll be popping up to ask him anything. Are you happy with the approach, or would you like him to actually...
I'd love to be popping up and asking him a question. Unfortunately, I might ask how Labour's proposals of putting more restrictions on will keep the country going and that more people were out and about. I just don't see how that would work. But unfortunately, I have to bring in a committee stage of a private member's bill, which will save £50 a year for motorists and will be the first Act of Parliament that removes an EU retained law. So I'm doing that at 3:30 rather than PMQs, unfortunately.
Now, Peter, you've always been referred, I think you're a proud member of the Awkward Squad, but actually, it seems to me like your numbers are growing. You're not sort of, there's a few members of the Awkward Squad on those Tory benches. There's quite a few of your colleagues who are well prepared to stand up to the executive, and that's healthy, arguably.
Yeah, what I like about the new Parliament is that members of Parliament are concentrating first on the country, their constituencies, and thirdly, the party. Actually, I think they do that on the Labour side, of people that, you know, come across and vote. And I think it's really healthy that Parliament, the MPs, represent their constituents, represent the country, and don't follow what a whip tells you to do. Why on earth do you get elected to Parliament to follow what someone else tells you to do? So I think it is really healthy for that. And the idea that Boris has an 80-seat majority, he does in theory, but perhaps not in practice.
You haven't got less awkward, it's everyone else has got more awkward, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much.
We're going to talk about the cost of living after the break, but I'm just going to go to Vera to give a tease of what do we do about these rising energy bills. It feels like we're heading into a perfect storm with energy prices rising, mortgage rates up, food prices up, council tax going up. What do we do? Is this the dominant political issue of the year, Vera?
It will be the dominant issue of the year. And of course, the most important thing is to look at those who are the most vulnerable. So one of the big things that we've been asking for as Liberal Democrats is to double the Warm Homes Grant and offer that to everybody on universal credit. We cannot go on increasing energy prices, not looking at the vast profits that actually energy companies making, and not, as a government, interfere in those discrepancies and leaving behind those people who are really struggling.
Brilliant. We'll be talking more about the cost of living crisis after the break. A reminder that Prime Minister's Question Times will be at 3 o'clock today. Of course, we'll bring you that live. But after the break, my panel will be back. We'll be looking at the likely flashpoints in Prime Minister's Question Times on the coming year. Before that, it's time for the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A bright and breezy winter's day out there. Many places seeing blue sky and plenty of sunshine. It is cold. It's going to get frosty tonight. And so although the winds are easing, it is still pretty blustery across the east. The isobars close together there through the North Sea. So a cold wind blowing on those North Sea coasts. But elsewhere, the winds certainly easing off through the day, lighter than yesterday, and many places fine and sunny. Now, there are some showers across Wales and Northern Ireland. We'll keep 1 or 2 scattered showers here today and across the far northeast of Scotland as well. Maybe the odd one grazing the east coast of England, later into parts of Norfolk. And it does feel cold across eastern England. Temperature only 4 or 5 degrees. Add on that wind, it feels colder than that. But elsewhere, temperatures 5, 6 Celsius in the sunshine. As I say, the winds for most are quite a bit lighter than yesterday. Now, as the winds ease off this evening and overnight, the frost will take hold rapidly. It's going to be a really cold night tonight. And later in the night across the south, we could also see some dense freezing fog patches. Temperatures, even in towns and cities, below freezing. Rural areas well below minus double digits, where there's snow lying on the ground, possibly over northern England and Scotland. Turns slowly milder tomorrow morning as wet weather comes into Northern Ireland. That will bring some snow for a time over the hills, and then as the wet weather hits the colder air across Wales, again some snow for Snowdonia, and then northern England, parts of Scotland. Some of the higher routes here for a time tomorrow, not very pleasant, with snow falling and the winds picking up as well. A cold air across the east, turning milder in the southwest, but the colder air pushes back in as the wet weather sweeps away, and that allows the showers later tomorrow to turn back to snow across Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and then through Thursday night across northwest England and North Wales too. And again, things likely to turn icy. So we do have warnings in place, yellow warnings from the Met Office. Next couple of days for snow and ice. See the Met Office website for details of those weather warnings.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. My fantastic politicians are still with me. Looking forward to PMQs this afternoon and to the year ahead. Remember, PMQs is later today at 3 p.m. as it's the first day back in Parliament. Of course, we will bring you that live. So still with me is Conservative MP for Wellingborough, Peter Bourne, Labour MP for Bermondsey and Old Southwark, Neil Coyle, and the Lib Dem MP for Bath, Vera Hobhouse. We heard from Vera about the cost of living just before we took the break. Peter, when Boris Johnson was a mere backbencher, but a leading figure in that Brexit campaign, he made a promise that VAT, if we left the EU, would be removed from gas and electricity and people would have lower bills.
Yeah, absolutely right. Good policy. Should do. Well, he hasn't done it yet, and I mean,
and he poured water on it last night.
I know. Yeah, I mean, obviously, COVID and everything has dominated politics. But now, and I agree with Vera that the important issue going forward is the cost of living, and this is a small way we could help reduce it. And in my constituency, most people just get by. So reducing something slightly is a big advantage. Equally increasing things is a huge disadvantage. So I think that's a very easy thing we could do, and we should take advantage of the fact that we can now do it because we're out of the EU, and we should do it.
Neil, it is a Labour policy, but the Prime Minister made a fair point last night. He said it would cost around £2 billion, and that well-off people like us would benefit from cheaper bills. Well, that's not very progressive, is it?
I think, it's going back to what Gordon Brown might call progressive universalism. If you make something available to everyone, it actually makes it more affordable to deliver, for example. So you wouldn't need so many smaller schemes like the Warm Homes Grant or cold weather payments. You could actually you could help far more people far more quickly through a simple costed measure like this, which is, I think the figure is actually £1.5 billion that I've seen. I'm not sure where the government's £2 billion figure suggestion comes from. But it is Labour policy. It's great to have advocates on the Conservative backbenches. It'll be interesting to see where the Prime Minister lands on this over time. But, I'm very worried for my constituents who do face rising bills, rising inflation, and a new Tory tax from April, which is going to really hit people in their pockets. They're going to feel this. It's going to be a real pinch point this year.
Isn't it interesting? Got a Labour member of Parliament arguing for lower taxes, and a Conservative government putting taxes up. It's a very strange world. Look, come across to us and join us and fight for lower taxes in our party.
Well, but what? But it's your government that are putting taxes up.
Indeed. Yeah, wrongly.
It's going to hurt
it's
people.
Bad idea. I mean, it's the wrong thing to do. And I think, you know...
You should be joining me.
Well, I know Labour pass it in any way some of Boris's measures get through because Labour piling the lobby with him. So we are in a topsy-turvy world. Let the Conservative government be conservative. Let it cut taxes and see who benefits. I have a horrible feeling that if Keir Starmer is in government now, he'd be putting more taxes up. So the message, I think, for Prime Minister this year is Boris be Boris. Start being the Boris that was on the back benches, and I think the nation would be better off if he does.
I'm afraid you're seeing Boris being Boris. He has a track record of breaking promises, and he's doing exactly that now. He may have promised you one thing when he was a backbencher with you. He's doing what he always does and just sorting himself out now.
No, I think Boris is doing a good job, but he could do better.
He could do better. Is he going to lead you into the next election?
I see no reason why not. I mean, if he follows Conservative policies... No, Boris is great. Look, we haven't got a long enough programme to go through all the... You know, we got the first vaccination in the world. He took us through COVID.
Right,
we took us out of the European Union.
We
got more police on the beat catching criminals, declaring crime. We've got record investment in the NHS. And that's only for the start.
Let us move on to a different subject. I'm going to start with you, Vera. Should Tony Blair, be given a knighthood?
Well, it's a difficult question if you wonder whether a knighthood for a prime minister should be automatic or whether it should actually be open to a political discussion of any future government or a future situation. If you believe that actually serving as a prime minister is one of the top public services, and it should be ultimately associated with an automatic honour, then the question doesn't arise. But currently, it's been left in a political ding-dong because some people don't like what Tony Blair has done. And indeed, we Liberal Democrats haven't been unanimously happy with what Tony Blair did, particularly during the Iraq War. But are you just sort of measuring out in political terms, or are you just saying anybody who has served as a prime minister of this country, which is a top public service, whether you like what is the politics that come out of it or not, should automatically be honoured or not?
Anybody who's served as prime minister, Peter, should get a knighthood. They've served our country.
That's a fair point. But I always thought what happened was prime ministers would go into the Lords after they finish their term. And I understand that a lot of prime ministers don't want to go into Lords because they'd have to declare their income that they're earning. So maybe we should stick with that and offer Tony Blair a peerage and see if he wants that. But I'm afraid I can't get worked up one way or the other. Okay. Tony Blair won a lot of elections. He was the best Labour prime minister, I guess, for ages. And but you know, put him in the Lords.
Put him in the Lords. I bet he wouldn't take it.
On that basis of the Lords' declared income, I can't see Johnson going there when he's dumped by the.
We're not going to dump him.
But my view on this is absolutely it's overdue. It's the best prime minister in my lifetime. No other prime minister in my lifetime left the country in a better state when he left office than when they entered. It's as simple as that.
OK. So I think you're broadly, all of you are broadly... Nobody's offended by Tony Blair getting...
The only issue I've had, because I've tweeted support for this, is around Iraq. And I just think, well, the 2005 election handed Tony Blair a 56-seat majority after the Iraq War, and I just think that my constituents whose lives are made far worse now would have benefited from continued Labour governments in the interim. So it's frustrating that people still feel so strongly about an issue that's passed.
Neil, Peter and Vera from the Lib Dems who joined us from Westminster, I want to say thank you very much for doing our first political panel of the year. It's been great to chat to you, and we hope you enjoy Prime Minister's Question Time later.
Thank you.
Now, years before the horrific murders of MPs Jo Cox and Sir David Amess, a woman stabbed Labour MP Stephen Timms at a constituency surgery. In my Real Me interview with him, he says he'd like to meet the woman who tried to kill him. Watch that after the news with Rosie.
Good afternoon. At 12:30, I'm Rosie Wright to give you the headlines. Coronavirus testing rules are set to be relaxed in England in an effort to reduce workplace shortages due to people isolating. Asymptomatic people who test positive for coronavirus on a lateral flow will no longer have to wait for confirmation on a PCR to begin their official self-isolation. The Care and Mental Health Minister, Gillian Keegan, says that around 1 million people are currently isolating. Meanwhile, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is going to miss today's Prime Minister's questions after testing positive for coronavirus. The Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, will stand opposite the Prime Minister at 3 p.m. today instead. Sir Keir previously has had to isolate after testing positive, you'll remember, on the day of the budget in October. Hospitals in Greater Manchester have postponed some non-urgent surgeries amid staff shortages due to COVID. At least 6 hospital trusts have declared critical incidents, meaning priority services may be under threat. The Prime Minister acknowledged parts of the NHS may feel overwhelmed in the coming days. Airline bosses are calling for testing requirements for international travellers to be scrapped. Research commissioned by Airlines UK and Manchester Airports Group suggests the tests make little difference in reducing the spread of Omicron. Now it's the dominant variant in the UK. Industry leaders report that the pre-departure testing requirements caused passenger numbers to plummet by 30%. In other news now, the mother of one of the Manchester Arena bombing victims said her son would love the new Glade of Light memorial that opened in the victim's memory today. Martin Hett was one of 22 people killed at an Ariana Grande concert in May 2017. The memorial is a white marble halo and it has each of the names of the victims on it. Families like Martin's who lost loved ones in the attack have been able to put memory capsules inside the halo. It is 12:33. You're right up to date. I'll be back with more for you at 1 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now it's time for my latest interview with MPs, where we go behind the politics and get to know the real person. Stephen Timms, Labour MP for East Ham, was stabbed by a constituent back in 2010. He tells me that he'd like to meet the woman who tried to kill him. Stephen Timms, tell me about your upbringing.
Well, I was born in Oldham, which was near where my mother grew up in Saddleworth in the Pennines. when I was very young, we moved to South Wales, which was where my father grew up. He was an engineer, Mum was a teacher. When I was 7 or 8, we moved to Hampshire. And so most of my upbringing was in Fleet, in Hampshire, where my mother still lives. And, you know, it was a comfortable, tranquil childhood on the whole. My father had a period out of work when I was in my early teens, so that was a bit of a challenge for the family, but otherwise it was a very happy upbringing.
Your Christianity is a big part of your life. Tell me, when did you discover your faith?
Well, that happened when I was a teenager. We started, my brother and I, my younger brother, I'm the oldest of 3, my younger brother and I both attended something at school organised by the local group of an organisation now called Urban Saints. It was called Crusaders at the time, and they dumped that name a few years ago very sensibly. But it was, you know, a youngsters group. He started attending, and so I thought, well, I better go too then. And we did socials and sport and camps and a weekly Bible class on a Sunday morning. And over a period, I decided I wanted to be a Christian, as he did too, actually, my brother.
And what part does your faith play in your life today?
Well, it's always since then been the starting point for my thinking about life and politics. And when I went to university, I was involved in the university Christian group, and it was decided one summer that we would go and help out on a church mission in Forest Gate in East London. And that's why I first went to East London. We were there for a fortnight, had a great time, I really enjoyed it, and decided then when I left university and got a job in a computer company in London, I'd go and live there. I joined the church, which by then this mission group had set up. My wife now was also a member of that group. And on arriving in East London, I joined the Labour Party. And so the fact that my becoming politically active and what I was doing because of my faith were so intertwined, I think. I've always, for me, what I believe has always been the starting point of my politics too.
Have your faith and your socialism, I don't know if you'd use that word.
Yeah, I would.
Have they ever fought against each other?
Not really. I mean, sometimes I'm aware that different perspectives arise from each about the same thing, but I think that's helpful rather than unhelpful. I mean, people often say you shouldn't mix up religion and politics, and if you do, you're asking for trouble, and they point to trouble somewhere in the world, and sure enough, you can see they've got a point. But actually, I think they're drawing the wrong conclusion. I think the truth is that religious faith is a very good starting point for politics because it's the source of exactly the values that we need to make politics work. Responsibility, solidarity, compassion, patience, persistence, truthfulness, all these things that you need if politics is going to be able to do its job properly. And I think a shortage of some of those values is one of the reasons that politics has had such a hard time lately. And I'd like to see more people coming at politics from a starting point of committed religious faith, because I think that would help us win back people's trust that politics can do the job that it's supposed to.
Which is more sectarian, religion or politics?
Well, they've certainly both got challenges in that area, but they are, you know, religious faith. We've seen it in the pandemic that, as far as I can tell, almost every council in the country has had to turn to churches or sometimes mosques, as in my area, to get food to people who otherwise would not have had it because of lockdown. It's curious that after a long period when we've kind of thought that religion was on the way out, its centrality in the lives of lots and lots of communities, certainly mine, but communities all over the country, has really been renewed pretty dramatically, I think, over the last 2 years of the pandemic.
I love talking to all of my interviewees, but because of what happened in May 2010, there was a chance that I wouldn't be talking to you because you survived an attempted murder.
I did.
Can you describe what happened that day?
Yes, it was the first surgery after the general election in 2010. And a young woman had made an appointment to come and talk to me. She said she had an employment issue she wanted to discuss. And she came to the surgery. I think she was the second person I saw that afternoon. And I thought she was coming to shake my hand. She sort of came around the table with her hand out. I thought she was, but actually that wasn't what she was coming to do. She had a knife and she stabbed me. She stabbed me 3 times. And to begin with, I wasn't sure she'd succeeded. I worked out what she was trying to do. I just felt as though I'd been punched. I wasn't sure she'd managed to get the knife in. So somebody came and restrained her, thankfully. I went to the gents' toilet just behind and I lifted up my jumper and saw there was quite a lot of blood. So that's how I knew that she had indeed succeeded.
What happens then? Somebody's called the ambulance at this time.
The ambulance came. I was taken to the London hospital. According to the surgeon, I had suffered a life-threatening but not imminently life-threatening injury. So they were able to patch me up, and I was okay. She subsequently told the police that she had 2 knives with her, a large one and a small one, and at the last minute she decided she couldn't hide the large one up her sleeve, so she was using the small one, which is probably the reason why I'm still here.
Have you had any physical complications as a result of the injuries that you sustained that day?
Not that I know of, no. I had, let's say, 3 stab wounds, suffered a stomach injury, which they were able to patch up. I don't think there are lasting physical ill effects, as far as I know.
Do you have flashbacks?
I don't, no. I mean, it's a curious, obviously it was a horrible experience. Looking back on it, it wasn't a hugely traumatic experience. I think partly because it didn't hurt all that much. That was the strange thing. As I say, it felt as though I'd been punched. I wasn't in agony. And I think perhaps for that reason, I don't have flashbacks or, fears about what happened.
How long before you felt able to have a constituency surgery after that?
Well, that was the beginning of May. I think the next surgery I did was the end of June. So it was a couple of months, and I did feel pretty anxious going back for the first time. But nothing remotely comparable has happened since. And actually, one of the kind of strongest memories for me of that period was the huge wave of support from my constituents, which I kind of hadn't experienced before, including she did it, she told the police, because she was unhappy that I'd voted in favour of military action in Iraq. Right. She was a Muslim, she'd been radicalised, but I had lots and lots of Muslim constituents contacting me saying, we're praying for you for a speedy recovery. And in a way, I think it strengthened my relationship with my Muslim constituents as a result.
She's serving life in prison?
Yes, with a minimum term of 15 years, which will expire in 2025.
Do you think about that? Her release?
I do a little bit, partly because I've recently had 3 letters from her, which the police have given to me. I wasn't aware of their existence until the police gave all 3 of them. They were written over a period, I think. And in the 3rd of them, she says she's sorry about what happened. So we're in a restorative justice process at the moment, which may lead to me meeting her at some point before she's released from prison, and I'd welcome that if that opportunity does arise. But we'll have to see whether it does or not.
Lots of people think they wouldn't want to meet that person. I think it takes strength to say that you would. Does your faith help you with say that?
It probably does. I mean, I think there's lots of reasons why I'd like to meet. I mean, you know, some of them aren't necessarily particularly laudable. I mean, you know, I'd like to know what my assailant looks like before she's on the streets. You know, I'd be keen to know. But I think also I would like to have a conversation with her about what happened. I mean, I'm quite often asked if I've forgiven her, and I always feel I don't see how forgiveness can happen without some sort of communication. And I'd like to ask why she did what she did, how she feels about it now, those sorts of questions, and let's see where that gets us to if the opportunity does arise.
You said it was the third letter she'd sent you, and we assume they were all reaching out to you to apologise. They
were in that direction, and as I say, the third one did clearly say she was sorry. Yeah.
Are you pleased that she'd written to you?
Yes. After it happened, after she was sentenced, I said to the police I would like to meet her then, just to find out a bit more about what was going on. She was my constituent. I had met her. She'd come to Parliament with a school class previously, apparently. I mean, I don't recall the occasion, but she had. She'd grown up in my constituency and spent her life there. And I would have liked to have met her then. The police at the time said they didn't think that was a good idea, so I didn't pursue it. But now that the opportunity perhaps has arisen again, I'd welcome that.
We all mourned and mourn the loss of Jo Cox and Sir David Amess. When those murders happened, it must have a particular impact on you and your family. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. As I say, I don't get flashbacks about it. So I don't think those two awful incidents were any worse for me than they were for everybody else. Jo Cox was a terrible loss to Parliament and to her constituents and to her very many friends and admirers. And I vividly remember where I was when I heard what had happened. And to begin with, I just heard that she'd been attacked, and I assumed that she was going to be okay. And then later emerged that she died. David Amess, I actually knew quite well because he grew up in my constituency. He'd always been very supportive of our community, although we don't elect Conservatives in my community. He tried to get himself elected and had failed. He was always very interested, and then he was a very kind person, I think, David Amess, and so he is deeply mourned as well.
I think I'm perhaps the only person who has permission to say this. I think it's difficult for politicians to say it, and I regret the fact that politicians can't say it's not safe for me to do surgeries in this way. You are living evidence of that. Don't you need a police presence or some security? How much? We don't want to lose anyone else.
No. I mean, I think members of Parliament do need to be accessible to their constituents. I think that's a really important part of the job and also a really important part of democracy. I think if we were to disappear behind some barriers, I think that would be a real loss to democracy in Britain. So I'd be very reluctant to go down that road. I'm grateful, actually, that over the last couple of months, police officers have often been at my surgery. And I hope we'll be able to get to a place where we can be safe again doing our jobs. But I certainly wouldn't want to see us stopping doing the jobs in response to what's happened.
I don't know whether to say that's very brave. It's very decent. It's very big. And I don't think I'd have the courage to say if I was in your position. So I just want to say thank you and admiration to you on that?
Well, you know, I enjoy doing surgeries. I enjoy the conversations I have at surgeries. I feel very unhappy if I had to stop doing that. You know, I think that would be a tragic consequence of what's happened, and I hope we can avoid that consequence.
Stephen Timms, an absolute pleasure to listen to you. Thank you for being so open. Thank you, Stephen Timms.
Thank you for having me.
It really was a genuine pleasure to listen to Stephen Timms. Now, as I mentioned, Prime Minister's Question Time will be at 3 p.m. today. Darren McCaffrey will bring you that, of course. But last night, the Prime Minister gave the latest advice on coronavirus measures, announcing daily testing for key workers, but no more restrictions. On breakfast this morning, Isabel and Eamon spoke to Gillian Keegan, Minister of State for Care and Mental Health. They began by asking about the government's decision not to implement further restrictions.
Yes, I mean, obviously we acted very, very quickly once we first learnt of Omicron. We closed the borders, and then obviously we introduced Plan B, which includes people working from home, obviously lateral flow tests before you go to large venues, etc., and wearing masks in many more places. So we've introduced those measures, but the most important measure that we've introduced is really bringing forward our booster programme, because the most important thing now we can do is we bought enough time for people to get those boosters, and we did meet the target for the end of December, but we still have more people to get to through the booster programme. So 2 million slots this week. If you haven't had your slot yet, come forward, please. This is the week to get vaccinated, because it makes a massive difference to our hospitals, to the hospitalisation, and also to how severe the illness is. Well, obviously what we know is it does protect you against infection by about 70% and against hospitalisation by about 88%. And one of the things the Prime Minister told us yesterday is that if you look at the serious illness, severe illness in ICU, 61% of those people have not had any vaccines and 90% have not had their booster. The booster is a really important step to building back up that wall of defence, so it does make a big difference. So the more people can come forward, and it takes a week or two before you feel the benefits of it, so please, today is the day you should come forward if you haven't had your booster. Well, what we've been doing all over Christmas, every day, 3 times a day, we've been meeting, we've been looking at all of the various aspects of the data, and, you know, we act on that, really. So getting the booster is the most important thing. Obviously, the working from home is a big part of minimising, particularly now people are back at school as well, as minimising the amount of people out and about. But the most important thing is the booster. And when we look at the impact of any future or further measures, the most impactful is getting people boosted, and the ones that we have in place today is Plan B. We've been looking at the contingency plans and building up the contingency plans all over the Christmas with our colleagues in the NHS and the people working in the NHS trusts. So the critical state that some of the trusts have declared, that is the first stage actually in our contingency planning, and it's a local decision that trusts can make to call on to say they need some additional support, whether that's mutual aid from their NHS colleagues around, or even through their local resilience forums. We always have these plans in place. We always have the plans to also consider curtailing or slowing down electives. These are part of the usual winter plans that we have in place. Obviously, we've got much more pressure this year with Omicron. But yes, we do always have winter plans that have these step-down arrangements. And what we've asked is for the plans to be based on 10, 20 and 25% absentee levels, so that we can work out what we would do in each of those scenarios. So yes, these are the sort of plans that actually the local resilience forums have had in place all the way through the pandemic.
Health Minister Gillian Keegan speaking to Isabel and Eamon earlier. Thank you for getting in touch today. Ian says Boris's decision not to lock down was purely to save his skin. He was in serious trouble with all the messes he created. Can some reporter please ask where are the results of his bogus Partygate inquiry? Elizabeth's been in touch. About time all these ridiculous green levies came off our bills. 25% would make a big difference. I didn't vote Green. I voted Conservative, but I won't again. What a load of rubbish they all are. And on the peerage for Tony Blair, Dawn says a few politicians not getting worked up over Blair hardly compares to nearly 711,000 of the public protesting against Blair being rewarded in the honours list. You have been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Thanks for your company today. The show is back every weekday from noon. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan, and we'll be covering Prime Minister's Question Time live on Darren McCaffrey's show at 3. But for now, it's time for your weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A bright and breezy winter's day out there. Many places seeing blue sky and plenty of sunshine. It is cold. It's going to get frosty tonight. And so although the winds are easing, it is still pretty blustery across the east. The isobars close together there through the North Sea. So a cold wind blowing on those North Sea coasts. But elsewhere, the winds certainly easing